So I recently had a back and forth on Twitter with everyone's favorite liberal, James Lindsay, and he decided he was going to come out and make the arguments. And they weren't good arguments. So he was arguing that, in fact, Britain is sovereign. Actually, liberalism has served Britain just perfectly, and there's no difference between what Britain has and what Israel has. Now, I made the point that no, Israel has a state that is acting in the interests of the Israeli people. And so I kind of baited him a little, saying, well, I support the Jewish claim to a Jewish homeland. Don't you? And he said, no, I'm not going to play that game. I said, no, I'm asking you why you accept the idea of collective rights for one group, that is the Jewish Israeli claim to Israel, and not the English claim to England. And so the fun begins.
Oh, God.
So, James, I'm going to read through his whole reply, because this is just an eye-opening reply for someone who's calling everyone else woke right. He says, you know the difference. The Jews were scapegoated and oppressed in nearly every country, especially the European ones, while they were stateless. Israel was reestablished roughly in its present location.
Wait, hang on. Maybe Carl will say this. The Jews were scapegoated and oppressed in nearly every country, especially the European ones. Does James realize that he literally just made the critical race theory argument? The critical race theory argument is black people were brought to America as slaves, as private property. That is what created white people, the capitalists, the bourgeois, and black people, the property, the own. This is what created systemic racism, or the system that upholds racism, which is what created all disparities in America, because slaves were oppressed by the evil bourgeois capitalists. And ergo, therefore, because slaves were oppressed by the evil bourgeois capitalists, the only way to account for this oppression is to do a redistribution of wealth, where you take the capitalist property and you make it available to the collective, so you fix the hierarchy so that everyone has access to all the resources. James literally just made the critical race theory argument about the Jews, saying the Jews were oppressed and therefore we owe them something. No, James, we don't.
A solution to this Holocaust-generating problem, seeing as they'd been in exile from the nation for about 1900 years at the time, but because of the neighborhood and the circumstances, it was established as an ethno-state with Jewish-specific privileges.
Yeah,
England, of course, has never been under this kind of threat, at least not since the North.
James is literally arguing for reparations for the Jews.
And not quite so severely. And then he tries to, I mean, this is amazing. The English are also a bit of a complicated mix of people groups. Not really. If you want to get really ethnic about it. So now, that's the core of his argument. And so we have established a couple of things. It's a special case for the Jews. It's not the same for you. They get something different because of historical oppression. Sounds kind of woke. And then he gets into the sort of, as AA put it, the Robin DiAngelo deconstruction of who even is English actually? Who actually would be claiming the right to England? And he finishes by saying, well, look, you are actually just trying to be a Nazi. I mean, genuinely, I'm genuinely trying to be charitable, but he just ends up, it's worth mentioning that while discussing German citizenship in the Third Reich, Hitler, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God. Right, so, okay, James. Everyone else is woke right, but you are woke right for the Israelis. And everyone who critiques this or wants a state that acts in the interests of the nation itself is Hitler, apart from the Israelis, who have got a special out because of historical oppression. And so I replied to this by like, look, James, this is very clearly rules for thee, but not for me. And this is genuinely the crux of everything that he's saying here. He said, and I made the point that, look, the Jews are actually not a unique instance of what happens to a stateless people. It's just that most stateless people don't have the resilience of the Jews. And so they just go extinct. And so this is not something that is unique in history for a stateless people to be mercilessly persecuted by people who have a state. But also, surely this makes the point of why every nation would want to have a sovereign state, to prevent this kind of thing from happening. I mean, the old world is full of ethnic states for a reason. They solve a problem. And again, he points out that this is a special carve-out for Jewish people to have a state that works in the ethnic interest of the Jewish people in Israel, and no one else has allowed it, because otherwise there's something wrong with liberalism and everyone becomes a Nazi overnight or something. And the thing is, I think that it would be madness not to learn from the tragic history of the Jews. And I think any sensible Jewish person would say, yeah, no, why would you want to have a government that privileges foreigners at the expense of the native people and like make sure that no one can have that apart from one people? I mean, surely you'd think that would create resentment against that one particular state that was actually operating in the interests of the people it purports to serve and rule over. And again, what exactly is the argument here for not having a state that works in the interests of the native British population, other than you're going to be a Nazi? Again, it's very peculiar. And it seems to be James's ideological commitment to being a liberal. And frankly, I just like, look, we're not Nazi Germany. This isn't World War II. None of this sort of thing is going to happen. And James goes on at length as well about how he thinks England is. I'm like, mate, you're not here. You don't understand how bad this is. And so he started coming back at me, pointing out, oh, my view is not rules for thee, but not for me. It never was.
Wait.
It's
James writes more. Oh, God. I cannot fathom writing Twitter responses this long. You just know James is all up in his feelings. He's like, he's like so focused. He's like so fucking autistic about it, where James has to correct everyone that doesn't agree with him on the internet in the most ridiculous and like wordy and, elaborate possible way.
Exactly what it is. Because of a critical theory style historical carve-out for the Jewish people alone, only they are allowed to have a state that operates in the interest of the Jewish people, but everyone else has to have a state that operates in the interest of international or global liberalism, and so provides exactly the same level of rights to anyone in the world who arrives here, even at the expense of the native people. And then he started deciding that actually the British state, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, is no different to the nations underneath it. So, I mean, if you're worried about fascism, James, that's basically the fascist position you have arrived at, because he says the United Kingdom already has exactly the relevant thing Israel has, which is national sovereignty. No, you can have, we have national sovereignty, in effect, but what we also have is a state that is hostile to the nation. And so actually the nation doesn't really have sovereignty. The nation is in fact occupied by a hostile state. And so saying, well, look, the United Kingdom is already sovereign. It's as free as any other nation to be whatever, any ethnicity they want, or whatever terms they want. It's like, okay, that's fine. That's what I want. I want a state that is actually not going to persecute me. And so he says, see, they don't want the same rules. They have the same rules, which is sovereignty. No, we don't. Again, the peoples of Britain, the English, the Northern Irish, the Scottish and the Welsh, are occupied by a hostile power. We do not have a sovereign state that is acting in our interest. You can't call it sovereignty if the state is acting in the direct opposite, in direct opposition to what the people want. And the thing is, we know what the people want because we are democracies. We have voted time and time and again on one particular issue, and it's not even close. It is absolutely not even close. And the public polling has been consistent for decades, coming on a century now, actually. And yet, the English are being turned into a minority in their own country. In the top 5 largest cities in England, the English are a minority. In their own capital, we're a minority. Whenever there is a conflict of rights between, say, young girls who don't want to be raped and, say, certain communities in the country, for some reason, the state always finds themselves on the side of the foreigner. It's not even accidental, because you would think occasionally it would accidentally come down on the side of the native people, but it never does, because it's not a coincidence. It's not accidental. And so he says, well, see, so you're just doing special pleading. It's like, no, absolutely not. I think it's completely fair for me to ask for the same as other people. I don't think anyone should have a carve-out. I don't think anyone should have a state that operates against the interests of the nation, right? No state should be doing that. And that's a completely fair rule that I think I'm arguing. And then he highlights this and it's like, sorry, I'm correct here, James. You have shown yourself to have, you specified, you stipulated the carve-out that you wanted to accept outside of your liberal ideals. And then you said, right, Israel can have them, but you can't. You can't have a government that abandons the liberal principles of universality in order to make sure that one particular group, as in the native people of Britain, prosper. Israel can have that. Britain can't have that. And you're a Nazi if you say otherwise.
Yeah.
And you have the temerity to call other people woke right and then say, well, hang on a second. Don't the English have a claim to England? You say, well, what is an Englishman really? Again, you have it's the gall, James. It's genuinely amazing. You have the gall to call other people woke right at this point, frankly. Because let's be real, you are just a leftist. You are just a leftist. You're just yesterday's leftist. And you find yourself completely, like, honestly, almost alone. Like you're surrounded by people who are like, you know what, James, I don't think that's going to work.
I saw James complaining on Twitter the other day. As you guys know, I monitor James Lindsay's Twitter account from behind a block just because it's so entertaining. Like, you just never know what James is going to say and do. And it's like, it is a train wreck. It's a train wreck that you can't look away from because, like, just when you think it's gotten as bad as it's going to get, no, he just keeps spiraling. You just have to keep looking at it and going, James, this is, like, fucking insane. And I saw James bemoaning the fact, he said, basically, this isn't an exact quote, but this is basically the gist of what he said. He said, I've lost all my supporters and I have to start over again completely. And I was like, you know what, James? Welcome to the fucking club. Welcome to the fucking club of being excommunicated from the conservative establishment and actually having to build your own thing on your own instead of being artificially inflated by all of these fucking grifters that you chose to interact with that were always intellectually dishonest, that were always going to discard you the minute that it got inconvenient. Welcome to being a real live adult, James, where you have to figure your own shit out and make your own money and actually stand on the temerity of your work. And obviously you can't do that because you went running to Israel for money. There are some of us, James, that never sold out. And I paid dearly for never selling out. I paid dearly for getting handed the talking points and saying, nah, I'm good. I'm going to say what I want. I paid dearly for all of that shit, but do you know what I did, James? I went independent. I built my own fucking community. I'm not funded by anyone but normal people, whereas you took their money over and over and over and over and over again, and then they discarded you as they were always going to do. The minute that you spiraled on the internet and got inconvenient because it's all about image and brand, darling, and they were never really on your side in the first place, and you had no intellectual honesty and no intellectual integrity to stand up and say, this is what's right. And now you're all surprised when no one wants to support you because you proved you were an intellectually dishonest shill from the fucking jump. And that never works out long term. It might work out short term. It never works out long term. So good luck, James. Good luck. I've been down the road you're going. I know how it goes. Good luck, bro. We'll see who's around in a couple years because I'm still going to be here. I have an independently built community. Do you?
For us. And again, calling people Nazis, man, if you're like, the British state is sovereign, and it's like, yeah, James, okay, great. The British state is sovereign, but it's not a national state. It's an international state. In fact, the British state has always been an international state, and now it's really acting like it. And so James is completely sure that we would want liberalism. More liberalism is the solution to this problem. And that is, of course, not the case. Liberalism is what has brought us here. It is the reign, the tyranny of human rights, universal human rights, that has put us in this position. And so, James, being very disconnected from the situation and being a massive woke ideologue, can't seem to figure out exactly what the British people are saying when they say, oh, we're actually being oppressed by our own government. We actually have a government that considers foreigners first in everything and the British people second if we are ever considered at all. We would prefer it if we had a state like Israel's, so the native people of the country, the Israelis, are considered first and foreign people are considered second. And that's not really very controversial. But like James says, no, the British state is sovereign, and so the power resides in them. Again, not very liberal. Like a liberal would say, well, hang on a second. If you're not happy with the government, I mean, especially an American, you'd think would say this. If you're not happy with the government, don't you have like a right of revolt or something? If you're not happy with that government, government's instituted among men for their own well-being or whatever. So you have a right of revolt to overthrow that government. And James is like, no, the British state is sovereign. The British state is what you're going to get. The British state is doing everything it ought to do. And you have exactly the same as Israel, which is why you're getting stabbed in the back and the Israelis aren't. And so it's like, right, okay, I would believe that if the British state didn't just come off the top rope and absolutely body slam you, James, because today they literally ruled and decided, the Home Office literally appealed to the courts and said, you know what? No. And this is just, it's honestly, it's kind of ridiculous, right? It's kind of ridiculous. I don't know if you see the whole headline there, right? Rights of asylum seekers trump the people, the rights of the people of Epping.
Wow.
That's what the Home Office in this country, run by Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, one of the leading cabinet members of the British government, the British state, have decided is the case. And so I don't want that. I don't want laws to be on the books that can arrive at this point, that can be made appeal to. As in, it should never be possible to be able to appeal to the rights of foreigners over the rights of British people when they're in conflict. Right? The state should not be possible, and I'm sure this couldn't happen in Israel, and it certainly won't be something that we'll be settling for. Do you understand? And I don't care whether you're like, oh, but my precious liberalism, as if this is your religion. I don't care. I'm not bothered by your offense on this. I'm bothered by the fact that I'm literally a second-class citizen in my own country. This is preposterous. And honestly, James, on this, you are just wrong on everything, right? You are just wrong on everything.
Real, Sargon.
The sovereignty of the state over the people, the nature of the carve-out that you've given, the weird woke argument that you make to establish this carve-out, and the fact that you don't know anything about the situation in this country where we are literally... I mean, this is the state arguing in favor of rapists, right? Literally saying, no, the rights of these people who have been predating on your children are more important than the people of Epping, the people of Britain, the people of England. It is just preposterous that there's anyone on the other side of this, and yet James Lindsay finds himself in alignment with Keir Starmer's globalist government. Because it is liberalism that has brought us to this place. It is liberalism that has done this to us. And it is liberalism that will continue to do this to us until we finally decide, you know what? We've had enough liberalism.
Yes, correct, correct. Classical fucking liberalism, which I don't think is any different than normal liberalism, if I'm being honest about it. The reason we have the problems we do is that liberalism, classical liberalism, whatever, will always be ineffectual at solving these problems.